Welcome back, everyone, for another deep dive. We're going to be looking at prompt engineering for large language models. Now, you're probably already familiar with basic prompting, but today we're going a bit further. We're diving into prompt combination.
That's right. Prompt combination. It's this really interesting idea where we're, like weaving together all these different prompting techniques into a single prompt. We can really start to see what these LLMs can do.
So why are people even looking into prompt combination? What makes this so potentially game-changing?
Well, I think with basic prompting, we're sort of, just scratching the surface of what these large language models can do. But with prompt combination, we can really start to kind of tap into, some of those deeper capabilities, get them to tackle more complex tasks, maybe generate more creative outputs, even, adapt to specific user needs. It's really exciting stuff.
Can you maybe give us like a concrete example of how this could actually work, like in practice?
Sure. So let's say you want a large language model to write like a news article, but you want it to write it in the style of a specific journalist.
Okay, so we want to like give it a stylistic template to follow.
Exactly. And to do this, we could use a few-shot prompting, right? Give the LLM, the language model, some examples of that journalist's work. That'll give the model a feel for the style and the tone.
Mm-hmm.
And then we could layer on top of that something called role prompting. We'd probably be instructing the LLM to take on the persona of that journalist.
So we're really going for like almost perfect stylistic mimicry here.
Right. But we're not done yet. To really make this useful, we want to make sure the output is relevant and informative. So we could incorporate contextual prompting, provide some specific details about the news event that we want the LLM to write about.
That's fascinating. It's like we're kind of like weaving together all these different threads of instruction to create this like very specific, a very targeted output. What are some of the other techniques that we can combine in this way?
Oh, there are quite a few, actually, each with its own kind of strengths and weaknesses. We could use something called chain of thought prompting. This one actually encourages the LLM to reason step by step. So it's great for those problem-solving tasks.
Okay.
We could also use something called constrained prompting. And this basically sets some boundaries, right, for the output. Make sure it adheres to, specific rules or formats. We even have something called adversarial prompting. And we can actually use this to challenge the LLM, really refine its responses. There's a lot of potential there.
It sounds incredibly powerful, but I imagine this level of complexity probably comes with some challenges, right? What are some potential pitfalls?
Yeah, for sure. I think one of the biggest challenges is actually just prompt complexity itself. As we add in more of these techniques, the prompt can become really long and convoluted to the point where it can actually confuse the LLM.
So it's kind of like a balancing act. We want to give it enough guidance to achieve what we want, but not so much that we overwhelm it.
Exactly. We have to keep in mind, the LLM's sort of cognitive limits. Another challenge is making sure that the techniques that we're using are actually compatible. Some techniques might clash and lead to unexpected outputs, even nonsensical ones.
Right. Are there any other downsides we should be aware of?
I think another one is overfitting. If we rely too much on specific examples in our prompts, the LLM might get a little too fixated on those examples, and then it may struggle to generalize to new situations.
So we need to kind of strike that balance between giving it specific guidance and allowing it room for, creative interpretation.
Yeah, exactly. And of course, we always need to keep in mind the ethical implications as well. Prompt combination really gives us a lot of control over LLM outputs, raises some questions about potential misuse, and maybe the generation of harmful content. We have to be careful.
For sure. So prompt combination. Really powerful tool, has all these exciting possibilities, but also some potential risks. We're going to explore some more specific examples of how these techniques can be combined and talk about strategies for, mitigating some of these challenges. We're going to really dive deep in all that.
Right. We were talking about getting an LLM to write a news article in the style of a specific journalist. Let's say we wanted to take that a step further and actually have the LLM write an opinion piece reflecting that journalist's viewpoints.
Oh, wow. Okay. Now that sounds like we could run into some issues with bias. How would we ensure that the output is still objective and informative while also, reflecting the journalist's personal style?
That's where the real art of prompt design and selecting the right techniques comes into play. We can use few-shot prompting, again, to give the LLM some examples of the journalist's opinion pieces. This will, really help the model to learn their specific argumentation style and how they present their evidence.
So it's not just about the writing style, right? We're trying to actually capture their thought process.
Yeah, exactly. And in addition to role prompting, we could introduce something called stance prompting. What we would do is explicitly state the journalist's stance on a particular topic, and then ask the LLM to generate an argument that supports that viewpoint.
Okay, so this sounds like we're pushing the LLM to not only mimic style, but also to think critically and construct a coherent argument, but all while staying true to the journalist's perspective.
That's the goal. Now, to address the bias concern, we have to be very transparent about the process. The output needs to state clearly that it's an AI-generated piece that's based on, the journalist's known viewpoints. We definitely want to avoid presenting it as the journalist's actual work.
Right. Transparency is key. It allows the reader to understand the full context and then evaluate the piece with that in mind. Are there other areas where we could see a big impact from this kind of prompt combination?
Oh, absolutely. Think about scientific research for a second. Imagine guiding LLMs to analyze those massive data sets, identify patterns, and maybe even generate hypotheses.
So we're talking about potentially accelerating scientific discovery. But how would we make that happen in practice?
Let's imagine that researchers are looking into a new disease. They could use contextual prompting to provide the LLM with a huge amount of information, all the relevant medical literature, data from clinical trials, even genetic information.
We're basically giving the LLM a complete understanding of the disease then.
Yeah. And then we could use that chain of thought prompting to kind of walk the LLM through a series of reasoning steps. For example, asking it to pinpoint potential risk factors, maybe analyze how the disease progresses, or even make predictions about how effective certain treatments could be.
Wow. It's almost like turning the LLM into this research assistant capable of not only processing huge amounts of data, but actually generating meaningful insights from it.
That's right. And if we incorporate adversarial prompting, we can challenge the LLM's hypotheses and push it to really defend its conclusions and refine its reasoning. That could lead to much more reliable findings.
Okay, so we're seeing that prompt combination has this enormous potential to not only change how we do research, but also how we analyze data, how we generate knowledge.
Yeah.
But with all this power, there's always a risk of misuse,
Right.
right? How can we make sure that we're using this technology ethically and responsibly?
Yeah, that's a really crucial question. We need to put clear guidelines and safeguards in place. For example, if we're using LLMs for things with real-world impacts, like giving medical diagnoses or legal advice, then human oversight and verification is absolutely essential.
Right. So it seems like the key is to view these LLMs as incredibly powerful tools that can enhance our own human capabilities, but they can't replace human judgment and expertise.
I completely agree. Prompt combination opens up all these possibilities for what we can do with LLMs. But at the same time, it also raises the stakes. We have to consider the ethical implications very carefully and make sure that we're using this technology responsibly.
We've looked at how prompt combination can be used in things like journalism and scientific research. For our listeners who want to start experimenting with this technique, where's a good place to begin?
Well, I think it's really important to first understand the strengths and the weaknesses of all the different prompting techniques. Experiment with each technique individually before you even start thinking about combining them.
So it's kind of like, you got to learn all the individual instruments before you can join an orchestra.
That's a great way to put it. Once you have that solid understanding, you can start with some simple combinations. Don't go overboard trying to cram in every single technique at once. Just focus on maybe 2 or 3 that work well together, based on what you're trying to achieve.
So there's definitely going to be some trial and error involved. It's almost like an art form in a way.
Yeah, it really is. And just like any art form, it takes practice, it takes patience, and it takes a willingness to experiment. Don't be afraid to, refine your prompts, see how the LLM responds, and just keep iterating.
We've talked a lot about the importance of prompt design. Are there any specific guidelines that people can follow to really craft those effective combined prompts?
Clarity is absolutely key. Each element of the prompt has to be concise and unambiguous, and it all needs to be logically connected. It's kind of like writing clean and well-structured code.
So we're thinking about good prompt design, almost like good coding practice.
In a way, yes. And just like with code, testing and debugging is essential. If you see that the LLM's output is a little bit off, or if it's not quite what you expected, go back to your prompt and really break it down. See if you can find any points of confusion or ambiguity.
It's almost like you're having a conversation with the LLM.
Right.
Understanding its responses and then adjusting your approach based on what you learn.
Exactly. And keep in mind that we're still pretty early on in exploring prompt combination. There's a lot more out there to be discovered. New techniques are emerging all the time, and our understanding of how LLMs respond to these combined prompts is constantly evolving.
So it sounds like it's a very exciting time to be involved in this field.
It really is. It's like being at the forefront of a whole new technological frontier. The possibilities are immense, and with careful consideration, experimentation, and a commitment to responsible use, I think prompt combination has the potential to change everything. It could reshape how we interact with these LLMs and how we leverage their incredible power across a whole range of different domains.
This has been a fascinating deep dive into the world of prompt combination. We've seen how it can enhance the capabilities of LLMs, revolutionize fields like journalism and scientific research, and even personalize user experiences. We've also talked about how this power comes with responsibility. As we continue to explore this new frontier, it's critical that we approach prompt combination with a thoughtful and critical mindset, keeping in mind both the potential benefits and the ethical implications. Thanks for joining us on the Deep Dive.
See you next time.